the title of my talk here is Impact Charters Happen in LA, the Results of Appeasement Policy. And I think a lot of us are historians in here. We know the results of appeasement with slavery, with slave states, taking more and more land until ultimately, they had to be defeated, but it didn't work to allow them more states. And even Lincoln's initial policy was to keep slavery, appease it, keep it in the South. And he eventually realized it had to be done away with, and that the war, it took the war to actually, for him to realize that, for him to make the Emancipation Proclamation and go down there and defeat the Confederacy and wipe out slavery. In World War II, we know the lessons of allowing Germany to expand, and they were emboldened on every step where they could take more land. They did until they lashed out at their so-called allies on both sides and waged an entire world war. So we're not talking about a world war here, but we are talking about a war on public education. I think we have to be very clear about that language, because if you're not, then the other side, they are waging a war, and if you're not acting as such, you're going to be defeated. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what's going on here in LA, and I don't want this to be me just talking to you, because I'm sure a lot of this stuff you guys know already. This is more of a discussion. My philosophy right now is, people just need to come together that understand these issues and study them and make action plans, and quit really relying on some big leader that's going to come in and save the day. Because I've kind of given up on that right now, and I'm getting back into just connecting with the people around me and figuring things out. I think everybody of conscious in this country is a genius, really, and if you start connecting those minds, you're going to find a way. So feel free to jump in at any time. So what we have, saturation. LAUSD is the #1 charter authorizer in the nation. They brag about that on their website. That's you wouldn't think that would be the case in a blue state with a teacher-friendly school board, but our school board policy is to invite charters in. And Sarah's going to speak more on the authorization process. She's done some good research on that. And the last 15 years, 287% growth. So it can't get any worse than it is right now. So if you want to fight privatization, this is the place to be. And I'm running for UTLA president because I feel like I want to take this union in a direction that really goes against privatization 100%. We're in a policy of appeasement right now, and it's not getting us results. We're getting creamed. We're the worst in the country right now. Co-locations, 70 co-located campuses. Do you guys all know what co-locations are?
Does that mean that you have a charter school and a public school on the same campus?
Yes.
And sometimes multiple charter schools. We have schools such as Westchester or Webster Middle School. They have like 3 or 4, sometimes 5 charter schools on that campus.
And I want to ask a question about that. So in terms of the funding that they receive, how is that allocated with the public school that's on that campus with those charter schools? Are they competing for the same funding?
Well, the funding follows the student in the enrollment of the charter, and so it's separate funding. However, things end up there's a lot of overlap. So I talked to principals at a public school on a co-located campus, and they're having to supervise the charter school kids because their bodies, they're there, they have to be accounted for.
Mandated report.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of oversight costs that LAUSD actually ends up incurring with these charters. And that's a whole nother issue, that they don't really collect all of the fees from charters that they should. And it's a big subsidy to the charter school industry. Running a public school, it's well, it's really a private school, but running a school in general, it's an expensive thing. It's a huge undertaking, a lot of connections. And, you know, the charter schools don't want to pay for everything that it takes. And the school district picks up the slack and doesn't charge them, you know, the fees that it costs to you know, make it all work. A lot of, so $600 million from our general fund goes to charter operations. That could be used for things like class size reduction, for counselors. So our schools, our students lose out. And now we're, you know, 1 in 5 students in LA in a charter. That's the proportion of, you know, public school and charter school students. It continues to grow in favor of charter school students as the years goes on. About every year we approve about 7 to 10 new charters in LA. You know, you look at the charts, that's what it is. So it doesn't look like a massive thing every year. Oh, some new charters were approved. But if you look at the trend over the last 20 years, it just keeps going up and up and up. And also, as far as union jobs, you know, we've lost 10,000 UTLA members in the last 2 decades. And a lot of that is
15,000.
15,000, you sure?
It's just under 15,000.
Okay.
The membership has dropped from a peak of 44,000 to now just over 30,000.
44,000 to just over 33,000.
Under 33,000.
You're talking about standard of living here, and union jobs, that's what built the middle class, and charter schools. They're really, like I said, this is the war and we're losing. And another aspect that is apparent is the segregation, right? So UTLA, we just did a great study. We have researchers here who really do good studies, but my critique is we don't really act accordingly. You know, if charter schools are segregating people by ability and by race, then why do we take a conciliatory stand? I think our stand here is to collaborate with the charter schools. Right? We learn from them, they learn from us, type thing. But you know, this is not okay to allow these things to go on. And I'll give you a few anecdotes on Goethe German Immersion. It's in my neighborhood in Mar Vista at Marina Del Rey Middle School. They're a private charter. They have an LLC, a corporation that runs a charter. They co-locate on an elementary campus. Or no, they're an elementary school that co-locates on a middle school campus. And really what you see is really stark. You see a lot of blonde hair, blue-eyed, white kids, and then the brown kids in the middle school. And they're pretty much they're separated during the day. However, they're kids, they end up intermixing, and the principals have to jump in and separate and things like that. But I went to one of their board meetings and talked to a board member, a parent from Englewood, a white lady, and she straight up told me, I asked her, I said, why wouldn't you send your kid to a public school in Englewood? And she straight up told me, I'm not going to send my kid to an all-black school.
You know what's so interesting that you say that? I'm really glad that you mentioned that in Englewood, because that's where I'm from and where I live right now. And I just wanted to bring up, there's this LA Times article that just came out. It came out last month, January the 8th, about how this charter school, Today's Fresh Start, was denied funding because of its lengthy history of financial problems and mixed academic performance. And that it was started by this wealthy couple, and I'll name them, Clark and Jeanette Parker of Beverly Hills. And they operate 2 charters on 3 campuses in Los Angeles, Compton, and Inglewood. So they portray themselves as philanthropists, but they've made millions from their charter schools and the schools paid more than $800,000 annually to rent the buildings the couples owned. So you have some of the poorest places in Los Angeles, in Inglewood and in Compton, where they have knowingly put their schools, and the schools themselves are paying $800,000 to rent the buildings annually, and they're making millions from these charter schools. So these people are not unaware, and as you mentioned in terms of policy, it's not an accident, it's not a mistake that they choose to go in places where people need a lot of help.
Yeah.
And they make promises or talk about diversity, and everyone knows that that's something that we want to have, and at the same time are draining the precious resources in these neighborhoods to make themselves millions of dollars, with of course no model of success that teachers and LAUSD public teachers are had to be accountable for over and over again. So it's just something that, as you mentioned, an anecdote, and this couple spent tens of thousands of dollars on lobbying and campaign contributions and to school board members and state elected officials, and you know they finally have been denied, but it's almost like they got away with the bag.
Yeah, I mean, real estate
Already, you know, it just is despicable.
Yeah, there's a lot of money in this, and you know, some of the most saturated neighborhoods are the lowest income neighborhoods in LA, and you know, those are the kids that need the best teachers, the best education, and these charters, they get away with. You know, I'm going to show you in a minute what things they don't have to do, right? As a school that's receiving public funds, and so the private system is problematic. A lot of people would agree private charters, not good, right? But there's a big contingent of people who feel like, well, the public charters, well, it can work that way, and that's an option. But, you know, some of the things I've heard, my old middle school, which I'm going to visit next week, when I was there, it was very diverse, black, brown students, English language learners. I called the chapter chair last week to set up a visit, and he's like, well, I got to tell you, you were here 15 years ago. Now, since we've become a charter, our school has basically become all white. We have very few EL students. And, you know, it kind of hit me, wow, so there's something going on with the public charters too, where they're able to segregate, really. So when we talk about the war on public education, I don't think we can, you know, really just say, well, the public charters are okay, let's just deal with the privates. And there's definitely a big issue with accountability here as well. So the billionaire agenda, you know, Eli Broad, his plan is to put half of LA students into charter schools within the next decade. He calls it, you know, increasing the market share for, you know, basically the investors. And, you know, this is what we talk about, this is what the war on public education looks like. You know, right now we have about 20% of our students in charters. They want to turn that into half. And you just think about all the profiteering that can go on, you know, with this type of scheme. So they have a clear plan to put more students in charters, but I don't really see our public, our union really pushing back. During the strike we had a moment there. We marched on CCSA downtown, had them surrounded, but that was one day and we haven't been back down since. Right? We need an ongoing campaign to, you know, mobilize against this and really reverse the trend.
What's CCSA? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the different set of rules, right? They're not required, right, to enroll educators and counselors. So if you think about retirement, and that's something we all really care about after, you really got to work 35, 40 years, have a decent retirement. I think that's too long personally. However, you know, with less people putting into counselors, you know, that means right now we have to put more in. Right now, that just happened, 2% more of our check goes into counselors, right? And, you know, with the charter school teachers not putting in, that's going to drain the system even quicker. So you think about, you know, 50% charters, or, you know, I've even heard 100%. Some people have this dream of having all the all the kids in LA in charters. And it's happened before in New Orleans. You know, they have 100% charter school system.
Oh, no.
Textbooks they don't have to provide. So we've had kids from Venice who used to go to our high school, went to a charter, and they come back and they're asking us for books for their class because they can't afford the copies and things that the teachers charge them for at the charter schools.
And the kids always enroll right before testing.
Always.
Yeah.
Always. That's when they're pushed out by the charter, just before testing.
Because then they would have to show some type of standardization of grades or performance by the students. So they're kicking them out before the testing so that they don't have to demonstrate how well or how poorly they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'll talk more about that too.
Wow,
Yes,
it's like a casino.
Yeah.
It is. It's
Yeah.
just, it reminds me of a game of slots, and you know, and you cut people off at a time when you know that that it's hot, and then when things cool down and you can just collect money from enrollment and attendance, then you allow the pot to build up again. And so every day they get the money from the attendance and the enrollment, and then when it's time for testing, students are kicked out and the money is gone for the students who were there for that majority of the time. But in terms of being able to demonstrate how well they're doing, and clearly they don't want to demonstrate that they're doing very poorly, students are let go.
Yeah.
If they're really doing well and this system's super working, oh, everyone's gonna get excellent grades and amazing and we're gonna prove to y'all, and absolutely not. Wow.
You know, with the credentialing, you know, teachers not having credentials in their subject matter, that's allowed. And the admin absolutely don't have to have administrative credentials. And you're talking about the people who are responsible for the whole thing. You know, that to me, that's just a huge liability, and it's not fair to the students. You know, their social needs, their academic needs. You have the people in the top positions not qualified. You know, it's not easy to get an admin credential, and I'm not saying all admin are great, but you should have had to go through that process and prove yourself. So, and then the last thing up there, you know, providing free or reduced lunches. So, you know, you're not dealing with the most, you know, the basic need of kids is to eat. And a lot of students are on these programs, and you know, somehow they're not, you know, Ed Code says public school has to do it, charter schools don't. So the UTLA AFT strategy, it's kind of the same thing. AFT is American Federation of Teachers. You know, charter accountability, that's the big buzzword that they use. And it's kind of this acceptance that, yes, charters are okay as long as we hold them accountable. You know, it's going to, you know, help provide a good, stable public education system. And, you know, I think that's just a flawed theory to start from. And I have a link there to the AFT website. And I can show you their language, but it's pretty much what I said. So right here, you know, American Federation of Teachers will develop a metric to evaluate charter school authorizers, charter school operators, charter management organizations, and state legislation based on our members' experience. Blah, 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 blah. But it's basically a metric to evaluate charter school authorizers. So they're basically saying it can work out well if we just watch them closely enough. You know, we can solve these problems. And the problem is, you know, really the system itself. And, you know, UTLA being affiliated with AFT, you know, it's hard for, that's where we get this policy from, basically. We're not really acting independently and thinking this through for ourselves. It's like, oh, this national affiliate, they have the answers, we'll follow along with their program. And going back to what I said, I just don't think that's a good organizing strategy at this moment in U.S. history, looking toward these institutions and these career politicians for answers. You know, I don't think they're there, you know. And I could be wrong about that, but I doubt it. History teaches me. I mean, I see what's going on. I'm not out there canvassing right now for the school board because I've read their platforms, and it's all about collaborating with the charter school industry. Nobody's taking a hard line against it. So it's really in rooms like this that this situation is going to be, you know, dealt with. So organizing charter schools, that's a big plank of our platform right now in UTLA. You go out to these charter schools that are unorganized and you help them get a union. You know, there's some good to that, in that you're organizing people who are not in a union, but at the same time you're creating a two-tier system, right? Where, you know, people have, you know, charter school teachers, they don't have, they have yearly contracts. There's no permanency in the system. So how can you even call that a unionized educator that doesn't operate under, you know, a solid contract that protects their job and, you know, their retirement, their health care. You know, charter school teachers, their health care is not the same. They have to pay in a whole lot, especially if they have a family. And, you know, electing teacher-friendly board members. You hear this constantly. And, you know, I really question this whole term teacher-friendly, because I see when they're elected, they take on management characteristics when they become elected, and they end up going along with upper management. The superintendent, our superintendent is a finance banker, and they pretty much rubber stamp what upper management and LAUSD wants. They approve charters, and you know, we really need to question when we're told somebody's teacher friendly, we'll prove it. You know, what have they said? What have they done? What have they done really? And you know, we have to reformulate our political strategy in this union. That's what I'm all about. The formula we're operating on, it's as good intentioned as it may be, it's a losing formula, and we have to change tactics in this war on public education. So that's my presentation. If you guys have any questions, comments?
I wanted to ask you, I guess, more in terms of the elections and stuff. I mean, I guess that's kind of the thing I'm thinking about. And when it comes to charter schools, I understand that, and I agree, that we have to have leadership. People will be in leadership positions because, for example, someone like me who is new to UTLA or new to education in this sense, just doesn't know, is ignorant. So that doesn't mean that I don't have opinions or my experience isn't valuable, but that is to say, I feel like leadership provides guidance or answers to addressing certain questions that I feel are really important, where we have the same end or same intention regardless of how much knowledge we have. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to electing you or someone who you or agree with, like a slate, I don't know, but what would you bring in this leadership position to people who are either been teachers and are jaded, or to new people who are ignorant to the pitfalls, so we don't have to, you know, reinvent the wheel and then learn, like when you said teacher friendly actually means management character, you know, instead of figuring that out on our own, oh yeah, 3 years later, like I wish somebody just told me. So what do you bring to that in that leadership position?
You know, I think, you know, language is very important, and it's often used against us. It's used to disarm us, right? They say school choice or teacher friendly, and really unpacking that language that's been used, that we've internalized really as a union, and questioning that. So looking at where we're at right now, and looking at the formulas, looking at the language, and unpacking it all, and bringing people together to help me unpack it. Because I'll have to say, I don't have all the answers. I understand that. I'm probably never the smartest person in the room, but what I do understand is, bringing people together, providing that space to really think before we're acting. Because I think a lot of times we're just handed an agenda, and we're not motivated to think. We're not told to think about what it is. It's like, here's a 3-year plan, go out and execute it. So it's about building that together and questioning what's been put before us.
Okay, I'd just like to bring up a couple of additional points beyond what you said. You were speaking of the collaboration between our unions and the charter movement, and I think it's actually worse than that. It's not simply collaboration with something that's already there. It's facilitation of charter expansion. UTLA, to its undying shame, actually endorsed Prop 39 back in 2000. Prop 39 was the proposition that allowed charter co-location. It was ostensibly a proposition that lowered the percentage of the vote needed to pass school bonds. And I mean, what educator wouldn't want to do that? Mm-hmm. So it lowered that percentage from a 2/3 majority to a simple majority. However, included in that proposition was co-location. Mm-hmm. And when I read the proposition, I could see, this is a Trojan horse. The very idea of this is not lowering the vote, it's the co-location. And I brought it up in the UTLA House of Reps and tried to get the union to take a stand against, not only to not endorse it, but to oppose Prop 39. And every single officer at that time spoke against my motion and spoke in favor of endorsing Prop 39, saying that it would bring more money into public schools. To which I responded, yeah, but ever-increasing amounts of that money isn't going to go to public schools. It's going to go to charters, which will now be co-located on public school campuses. Mm-hmm. We endorsed it. UTLA endorsed that. You speak of the AFT strategy. You're letting NEA off the hook because they have the same strategy. And they represent 2/3, well, now everybody in LAUSD is in both, but all public school teachers are in both AFT and UTLA, but historically you had to pick one or the other, and 3/4 of the teachers in LAUSD were NEA, not AFT members. And that's roughly the percentages nationwide. So NEA doesn't get off the hook because they take the same, hands-off strategy toward charters. And finally, this is tied in with our union's umbilical attachment to the Democratic Party, because we tend to think of charters as being this conservative assault on public institutions, but in fact, the biggest pushers of charters have not been the Republicans, they've been the Democrats. And the charter legislation in California was written by a Democrat and passed by a Democratic legislature and signed by a Democratic governor. And Eli Broden, who you mentioned, is a Democrat and a Democratic Party donor. Arnie Duncan, who is huge pro-charter and was Barack Obama's Secretary of Education, is a big charter promoter. So, I think our unions, because they sit in the laps of the Democratic Party, they're unwilling to do anything that might piss off their donor class, and a bunch of their donor class, like Eli Broad, are big promoters of charters.
formula, our losing formula. It's, you know, political action means writing a big check to a Democratic Party politician and, you know, hoping that they're gonna save us, you know. So absolutely live in a blue state. We have more charters. California is the most charterized state in the nation. LA, the most charterized city in the nation. So yeah, the Democratic Party gets a big fail. They're on the other side on this war. And until we realize that, we're going to continue to spin our wheels. So thank you very much. And Sarah has got some great points on the charter authorization process in LAUSD. She really gets into the weeds of that.